So if you're someone who has kept up with all of the various different Nintendo Switch news, rumors, and leak cycles over the last couple of years, you may have remembered that there was all of that talk from 2021 to 2022 that 2022 would truly be the best year that the Nintendo Switch has seen so far in terms of new software releases. And while in hindsight, 2022 was actually arguably one of the best years in the Switch's entire history, we saw Zelda Tears of the Kingdom delayed into May 12th of 2023, causing what otherwise probably would have went down as one of the best years of Nintendo Switch's gaming history in terms of new software releases to become still an excellent one, but missing that major blockbuster brand new Zelda experience. And now as we find ourselves in the middle of April in 2023, this year is shaping up to look more and more interesting in my opinion, because we know that Zelda Tears of the Kingdom is around the corner as a 2023 release in May, and we also know to expect Pikmin 4 in July. But past that is where we really have to slow down and think about what kind of year Nintendo might be building out for us fans here, because if you look at their entire history on the Switch, I think I can argue a case that this is a very different year than any year we've seen prior. And in today's video, I want to break down all of the different possibilities and different routes we may see Nintendo go when it comes to new software releases for the Nintendo Switch in 2023. What's up, Nation? If it's your first time on the channel, make sure you join Sunbro Nation by subscribing below, hit the like button on this video if you enjoy it today, and make sure you turn on your bell notification icon so you're kept up to date with all the newest gaming news. And as I mentioned, guys, today we are discussing Nintendo Switch's 2023 software release schedule, what we know of so far, and then a lot of the unknown, because that is what a big portion of this conversation will consist of, for the simple fact that the only brand new games that we know to expect out this year are Zelda Tears of the Kingdom and our Pikmin 4, and that is of course on the first party Nintendo front, as we are not discussing all of the various third party games that are in the pipeline to hit the platform this year. Now, besides those big projects, and Zelda Tears of the Kingdom clearly being the bigger one, as it definitely has the most eyeballs on it, it's the sequel to the biggest, most successful Zelda game of all time, period, which of course is Breath of the Wild, and it's set to have the biggest launch in franchise history, and it's probably the most anticipated Nintendo Switch game release, period. At this point, I think it's fairly safe to say that, and while I can't wait for that game to come out, we know that Pikmin 4 is next up in the release schedule past that. And to be fair, an honorable mention is Advance Wars 1+2 Reboot Camp, out later this month, also a Nintendo published title, but that was held back a year just due to the real world situation going on, Nintendo not wanting to ruffle any feathers and playing it safe when it comes to a PR perspective. Anyway, that game's finally dropping, but I wouldn't necessarily count it as a 2023 game, even though it is technically releasing in 2023. Now, besides those official major game releases, we know to expect some Xenoblade Chronicles 3 DLC, Mario Kart 8 Deluxe Wave 5 and 6, which is a big deal because Mario Kart 8 Deluxe is still topping the sales charts month in and month out on the eShop, on physical sales. It's kind of ridiculous, but the game won't stop selling, and Nintendo knew that and doubled down and decided to create DLC to throw out there, doubling the amount of tracks, and we know that that wraps up in late 2023, likely the October or November timeframe at the latest is when we can finally hop into Wave 6 and everything will be done. We will likely see Wave 5 release over the summer window, and then we also have the Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, 2 different DLCs to expect, and we know at least one of them will be out for certain in 2023 in the fall, and the other one is branded to be winter 2023 according to the Pokemon Company, but that could easily slide into early 2024 as well. And you may remember that the details of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet DLC 1 and 2 were fully leaked ahead of the official announcement, and it also had some very interesting information claiming that there would be a performance patch to launch alongside of DLC 2, which is supposedly set to carry those games forward to new next generation Nintendo Switch hardware. And while that doesn't necessarily have to happen for any of the logic that we're going to be talking about with how Nintendo may structure their release schedule in this video, I do think you have to have that in the back of your mind when we talk about the very interesting year that is shaping up so far in terms of us just not knowing anything, because besides those DLC packs, if you think to years prior, we did have mainline Pokemon games to look forward to. We had Kirby releases. We had Splatoon 3, of course, in 2022. We had Metroid Dread, a brand new installment in the Metroid franchise, launch in 2021. We had a Zelda port in 2021 in the way of Skyward Sword. We've been pretty consistent with having some kind of representation from Nintendo's major franchises in some way, shape, or form, even Mario games being trickled out over the years, and we've oftentimes got some kind of advance heads up or notice around when those games would drop. And in 2023, we find ourselves looking around and realizing that once we get past July with Pikmin 4, we have nothing in the pipeline, not to mention that Pikmin 4 is definitely more of a fan service game, and it's not going to drive additional console sales or even reach a very large user base at the end of the day, because if you're a big Pikmin fan, you're actually in the minority in the sense of it's not a mainstream Nintendo franchise. It will be interesting to see how it sells after it comes out on such a successful platform like the Nintendo Switch, but it's not a household name like a Mario or Zelda or even Donkey Kong or Metroid for that matter. So again, we will have to monitor how that game does, but it's not one of the big ones in Nintendo's pipeline. You then may also remember a lot of interesting talks this year going on from different gaming journalists, one of which we've talked about on the channel a bunch by the name of Andy Robinson over at VGC, who is definitely one of the more reliable voices when it comes to reporting on things within the gaming industry. And shortly after it was announced that Nintendo would not be aligning themselves with E3 due to it not fitting in their marketing plans, he took to the internet to claim that he had also heard other reports that were already being talked about online at that point, essentially stating that Nintendo didn't have the strongest lineup of software for 2023, and in fact, past Tears of the Kingdom, there was no quote-unquote heavy hitters, and Andy Robinson did say that what he heard kind of fit in line with that, but he later corrected it, and this is what a lot of people miss and don't go back to say that as he got more information, that it wasn't necessarily that Nintendo didn't have any big software plan for the rest of this year, but rather it was more stacked towards the end of the year, and there would be a dry spell following Tears of the Kingdom, which I think is really what we're going to see, because if you don't count Pikmin 4 as a big system seller, heavy hitter type of game, then we really probably will have a drier pipeline other than DLC, new NSO additions, and updates to existing games on the platform. We will likely see some kind of gap, not to mention the fact that since Nintendo is not aligned with E3, I am hopeful that we get that traditional June time summer Nintendo Direct presentation. We could also very easily see them repeat to what last year's Direct schedule was, where you had a couple game-specific Directs, but the big one for the summer was actually a mini partner showcase instead of a standalone mainline Direct, just simply because they didn't have the big software and announcements set to hit over the summertime, and they chose to highlight their partners instead of themselves in terms of new software additions. And then we saw their big staple Directs be the February and the September one, and if that is the case, it would line up and make more sense with why we would see some kind of a gap after Tears of the Kingdom / Pikmin 4, and then you would have a lot of announcements hit at something like a September 2023 Nintendo Direct, and that could be when we hear about their broader plans for the big missing Nintendo Switch games. And that's where you have to kind of pivot the conversation and realize that a lot of those announcements at the September Nintendo Direct could indeed be for next generation hardware. Now, I am not sold on the idea that next gen hardware is coming out this year in the holiday season. Some people definitely think that that's the case, and that's what Nintendo will do. I do, however, think that there is a decent chance that we could hear about it at the end of this year, and Nintendo may start to promote it heavily and launch it in early 2024, sometime around that March window, at which point the Nintendo Switch will have hit a full 7 years on the market, so keep that in mind. But depending on what happens with that new next-gen hardware situation, I do think that that sways some of the bigger titles, because I personally believe that we will start to see more ports and remasters announced specifically from the GameCube library, as a lot of the rumor mill speculation talk going around online right now has to do with games like Paper Mario Thousand Year Door being ported over, F-Zero GX getting some kind of remaster and port, and then you know that Prime 2 and Prime 3 are likely to come out at some point before before Metroid Prime 4 hits, which is technically in Nintendo's pipeline and release schedule, but it's not on their official release schedule on their website because it is still a to be announced release date for that game. And I am more of a firm believer now that we will likely see that launch on next gen hardware. And I don't think that 2023 is necessarily a likely year for that game to drop on the Switch, just due to the fact that it does have a lot of eyeballs on it. Nintendo wants it to be the big leap forward for the Metroid franchise, and we haven't seen a single glimpse of the game yet. We haven't seen artwork. We haven't seen anything in terms of official confirmation of what the world looks like, the story plot, anything. And I do think that Nintendo will give that game a couple trailers spread out at different directs. So the soonest we could see it is something like a mainline summer direct if we get that, and the latest we would hopefully see it would be something like September or February even next year, and then they start to position that as one of their big games in the launch window that will be lined up for next gen hardware. But I do think that Metroid Prime 1 Remaster being released in February was a telltale sign that Nintendo knows where they're at in terms of the development with Prime 4, and I do think that 2 and 3 will make it over at some point before its release, meaning we likely could see those just shadow drop at some direct presentation, whether that be in the summer or September. I think that those are both likely games that will come over, and hopefully they just come over separately at $40 a pop, just like Metroid Prime Remaster did, with more modern controls. They may not get all of the love and care that we saw in the graphical fidelity for Metroid Prime 1 Remastered, but as long as they're playable on the Switch, that's the biggest thing for me. Then we could indeed see at the end of this year or even early next year those long-awaited and heavily rumored Wind Waker and Twilight Princess ports. And how Nintendo does that, whether or not they're released at the same time as a double pack and a great price point of $60 or something, or if they sell them individually as $60 games, that's all up for debate and speculation. But I do think that those games come over at some point. It's just not clear whether or not they will come to the Switch or to the next gen successor. And then past that, we do just have a couple games that are in the rumor mill speculation talk that it's just time to see them get new installments. And I think that these are the type of games that will be saved for next generation hardware at this point in time, and that is the Mario game and the Donkey Kong game. Whatever they are, we don't know what they are clearly at this point in time. They are in the pipeline. Miyamoto even recently in an interview just told fans when asked about it to watch future upcoming Nintendo Directs for what is next for Mario in terms of a mainline game. We know that the Mario movie is now the most successful animated movie of all time, period, which is insane to say out loud, and it had the biggest opening weekend, beating Frozen 2, which is like, come on, that you can't get more mainstream than that. Mario is a household name for sure, and now he is in the eyes of a whole new generation of people who took their kids to go see the movie, and it had so many great references to those classic gamers who grew up with Mario their whole lives. It was a great movie through and through, in my opinion. Regardless of that, I think Nintendo does want to capitalize on that momentum, but they also know that Mario is a system seller, and I think that it likely launches the next-gen hardware. We might see a trailer for it. It might even be cross-gen and release on both, although I do think Nintendo's more likely the company to just cut off the current generation and hop straight into the new one more than anybody else, more than Sony or Microsoft out there. I think that when we get that next gen Mario, it's one of the reasons you have to upgrade to the new hardware, and you can only play it on that. And then I think that Donkey Kong fits that same build. I think that that's another game that, while it's been so long since we've seen anything new from DK, it's likely being positioned as something to help sell, or at least be in the launch window of next gen hardware. And so that really leaves 2023 to be an interesting one for Nintendo, because we could indeed see Nintendo surprise jam pack the rest of 2023 with big Mario, Donkey Kong, and even Metroid ports and things, or we could definitely see this be more of a port and remaster type of year, and then we start to really talk about the new iterations and new experiences for Nintendo's mainline franchises, start to get that focus in development on their true next-gen hardware. But I want to hear from you guys at this point in the video, your personal thoughts and opinions on how you think we will see Nintendo navigate the rest of this year when it comes to their software release schedule, and whether or not you think that we do have a shot at a very strong end of 2023, or do you think that this will actually go down as one of the lightest years in new Nintendo Switch software and games that we can play? And do you think that that ties into their broader plans with how they launch next gen hardware? Or are you somebody who actually thinks we're maybe still with the Switch for a couple more years to come? So regardless of your thoughts and feelings on everything we talked about today, I do look forward to hearing from you all in the comments down below before you leave the video, as I do look forward to getting a back and forth conversation started with you all around this topic. Go watch yesterday's video next if you haven't already, which is on screen right now. Also make sure you like, subscribe, turn on your notification bell, and I will see you guys in the next video.